Serious, lawyers, what's a case you regretted winning? As a personal injury attorney, I've seen a few clients win the blue collar lotto or getting more money than they reasonably know how to deal with. I do my best to educate them, but my job is to try and maximize their recovery, not teach them finance. I have definitely contributed to a few drug habits. I do juvenile work, criminal law and family law. I represented this client first when he was a juvenile charged with disorderly conduct at school and fighting. Then when he became an adult it was for simple things like possession of marijuana. As he got older, it became easier and easier to figure out what part of his life hasn't gone as well as it could, and I tried to counsel him and push him to better himself. He got his GED. He started going to NA. He started classes at a community college and found a part-time job. On the night of his 21st birthday, he was charged with a DWI. Of course I'll take care of that too. About 6 months later, we are due in court for trial on a Monday, and he doesn't show up, which at this point in his life is highly unusual. As I'm trying to figure out where he is, the court starts going over arraignment's first appearances, and then lo and behold 3 people are up for murder charges. The prosecution starts to tell the judge what the fact circumstances of the case are and mentions a few victims' names. Apparently, my client was at a party when these 3 individuals decided to allegedly do a drive-by shooting. My client suffered multiple gunshot wounds and didn't make it to the hospital. So, by default, as you can't prosecute a dead person, the state has to take a dismissal. I guess technically a win. Either way, it was crushing to me as I thought he had really turned his life around. He had. Edit. Wow. This really blew up. Thanks for all the positive comments. And the bling. Also, since some people asked for clarification or were confused. 1. I truly believe he was on the right path forward. 2. GED equals high school equivalency diploma. 3. NA equals Narcotics Anonymous. 4. DWI equals driving while impaired. Family law is a little different in that you never really win per se. You may get more favorable rulings or better terms, but unless the opposing party did something illegal or mind-bogglingly stupid, it's never a decisive win really. Although I did have a case where my client fought really hard for the dog, and then ended up turning him over to a shelter. Ducking asshole. The ex-wife received an anonymous tip and was able to get him back quickly. Prosecuted a murder case. 21-year-old kid starts dating an older guy's ex-girlfriend. The older guy, real roughneck, loose connections with a local biker gang, was going all over his small town talking about how he was going to kick the kid's ass. The older guy sends some nudes of the ex while he's getting drunk at a bar, so the kid says something smart ass in response. Older guy comes to the kid's house to fight him. The kid shoots him once, and the older guy dies. Jury didn't buy self-defense or castle doctrine. Convicted of voluntary manslaughter. 20 years. Burned up his appeals with no luck. I have a son about the kid's age. I could totally imagine him doing the exact same things if he were in a similar situation. It's going to haunt me until I die. No doubt about it. Started thinking about other work the moment the verdict came back. Did a divorce where the husband, who I was representing, wanted to trade custody of his children for a set of bedroom furniture. The bedroom furniture was not even like a family heirloom. It was furniture that you could probably get at a Rooms to Go or something. Ugh. Still makes me ill. That's why I got out of family law. Edit. I'd honestly like to thank all of you for your various points of view on this particular pain point in my career. For the record, yes, I did win that particular point, but it did not fill me with any joy. But those who said that it was probably for the best, perhaps you're right. The one where the client never paid. Edit. Clarification explanation. When I was a young associate, I was assigned to do a civil commercial trial for a client that was not happy with the senior partner. He stopped paying. We moved to withdraw. The court refused to allow us to withdraw and forced us to go to trial. Spend a significant amount of time in trial prep, etc. I win the trial. Client never pays. Client's position was that my boss screwed up the deal and that there never should have been a dispute trial to begin with. Firm policy prohibits us from suing clients because that causes a drastic increase in malpractice premiums. 9 times out of 10 if you sue a client for non-payment, they will countersue for malpractice. There was a case that I saw that involved a claim with fee shifting, meaning that if the plaintiff won, their attorney's fees would get paid by the defendant. Defendant pushed an aggressive legal position at trial that the judge agreed with, and won, avoiding a few thousand in liability to the plaintiff and a few thousand in attorney's fees. So far so good, but then the plaintiff appeals all the way to the state's high court, requiring a ton of briefing and time. High court agrees with plaintiff, reverses and sends back to the trial court, which now enters judgment against the defendant for a few thousand in damages against the plaintiff and tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees from the appeal. The defense lawyer probably regretted winning at first on that aggressive argument to the trial court. Guy lost his wife and children in a car accident. He wanted to exercise to get his emotions and mental health back in check. Doctor wrote him recommendations for exercise equipment, ball, chin-up bar, nothing crazy, and he submitted the expenses for same to his insurer. Client, insurer adjuster, wanted this for tooth and nail because exercise equipment was only covered for physical rehab and he was not physically injured. I do not practice in this area anymore. In one of my first cases after passing the bar exam, a young man retained me on a drunk driving charge. No one was hurt, but he totaled his car. During trial, the arresting police officer testified that my client was clearly drunk at the accident scene, and that my client was loudly blaming the accident on the ducking arsehole who stole his car, crashed it, and then fled before the cops arrived. However, according to two other witness statements tendered into evidence, it was my client's friend, the passenger, who was screaming about the arsehole who stole the car, not my client, the driver. The cop must have confused the two men during his testimony. This discrepancy raised a reasonable doubt in the judge's mind, so she acquitted my client. At the time, the acquittal was somewhat unexpected for me. In my personal view, my client was clearly drunk and responsible for the accident, regardless of who was blaming the mystery arsehole to the cops. But I was happy my young client got off. No one was hurt, and lessons were learned. And I was quite euphoric to have won my first criminal case. The regret? About a month after the acquittal, my young client called me at 3 AM from the police station saying it's me again. The police arrested me for drunk driving again. Can you help me? Not only did I answer no, instantly regretted getting the earlier acquittal. My client apparently didn't learn any lessons. Was representing the government at a social benefits tribunal. The applicant was an autistic man who was struggling to make ends meet but was trying his absolute best to contribute everything he could to society. He had a job where his manager was very accommodating and he was a very sympathetic person. He just wanted the extra cash to make his life a little easier for himself. Sadly, he didn't qualify for the benefit, but I think he deserved it. My closing argument was that no matter how much we empathized with this man, no matter how deserving we thought he was, he simply didn't qualify and the tribunal had to apply the law. He was unsuccessful and when I left the building to head back to my office he was just sitting outside on the curb crying. That image has stuck with me for a few years. Pretty heartbreaking. Edit. For those of you that are sending me words of support, thank you. That was the lowest point in my career and I have moved on. It's really important to remember that mental health in the legal profession is a very real issue that is killing people. There aren't sufficient supports in place to help people like me and many others who find themselves in positions like this. For those telling me I'm a horrible person, you literally can't say anything that will make me feel worse about this, so please have some compassion. I work elsewhere and provide a much needed service to my country and my community. I also donate to a mental health charity on a monthly basis. What are you doing to fight unfair systems? Also, in case you aren't aware, social benefits are a finite resource. Often, the criteria for qualification are strict. Not everyone can receive it, otherwise there wouldn't be enough to go around. The particular system I was working in was a needs-based system. Those with the most severe disabilities met the criteria and I often advocated on their behalf despite the government's initial position if I felt they met the criteria. Women wanted her daughter custody. We used the state preference about custody going to the mother, judge bias, her improved economical situation, and some minor garbage like her grades and discipline problems at school to discredit the dad. Not even a month after we won, the mother calls and says she had a problem. Then she explains the problem was that her BF raped the girl, and after that she had the gall to ask we pick up his defense. One of the things that made me quit to gov work. Had this happen to me twice. Got my client out on bail only to thereafter have him up and killed. First time, he was in building supposedly selling. Got chased by the police and a struggle ensued where he was shot point blank in the head. Mother told me that it was my fault that he was killed and that I was working with the DA and the police. Second time, a young man no more than 16 gets released while waiting trial on robbery. One of the conditions of release was that he maintain a curfew. That very night he breaks curfew, goes over to somebody else's house and was killed in a drug-related robbery. Mother blamed me and said that the devil was working through me, that we were all demons. Criminal defense is a hard business. Edit. Thank you everyone for the kind comments. Rest assured I don't take what they said personally. I've been around a long time and know that they were just acting out and that I just happened to be the closest person at the time and the only one who would actually listen to them. Edit 2. Lol. Yeah, I can see how that reads like I might be talking about my mom. Going to leave it because of the lol. But for the record, my mom thinks I'm a saint and can do no wrong. Edit 3. To the people saying that got what they deserved. Honestly, it's easy to throw stones. But drugs, alcohol, mental illness are tough things. GD willing, none of you will know what it's like. Edit 4. To those saying criminal lawyer bad etc. It would be easy if the world was just and the government never overreached. Who you going to go to when it's your turn to be ground under the wheel? I got a spoiled brat of a teenager cleared of a shoplifting charge when he absolutely had done it. His rich parents hired me to represent him. I did that to the best of my ability, and we went to trial and won. But I can't say I felt good about it. This kid needed to be taught some accountability for his actions and his parents just wanted to buy their way out of any trouble he got into. I'm a work comp attorney, now represent injured people, but used to work on other side insurance defense. There was an applicant with a serious injury, fell off a ladder, busted back with fusion, shoulder duct, years of treatment, internal issues, psych issues, really just ducked up, 50% plus permanent disability. We were 5 years in and finally getting to settlement time. If we bought out his future medical, settlement pretty far into 6 figures. This guy was the sole provider for wife and 2 kids. Then we found out he had a aggressive brain cancer. Expected only couple years to live, at best. Thus, we wouldn't buy out future medical anymore. Still got permanent disability for $60 cash. But can't give medical buyout based on 25 plus year life expectancy anymore. I felt terrible for the guy and his family. Me and the adjuster tried to get insurance to agree to some sort of amount like 5-year buyout. But the bean counters said hell no. The attorney knew it wasn't me making the decision. Even though he worked on that guy's file for 5 plus years, he decided to take $0 in fees. I have so much respect for that attorney turning down $10k plus in fees to help his client in a very itty situation. I work in medical malpractice defense. Once I had an obstetrician gynecologist who burned a patient during a procedure. When I met with the doctor, he lied to me throughout the representation over 16 months, saying he had no idea how it happened. There is a doctrine in law called res ipsa, meaning absent some sort of negligence. This accident could not have occurred. Woman came in without a burn, and after the procedure, the woman left with a burn. There's no way this doctor didn't know what had happened. The area of the burn was where he was operating on. It wasn't until I brought up settlement, because this was not a case we could win, did he say, oh maybe I do know what happened. We ultimately settled that case, which is considered a favorable outcome considering the potential high monetary verdict. Sometimes I think this doctor really ought to have lost that case and their license. I did some custody work early in my career and won some cases more on the merit of my trial skills than on the merit of the parents. The thing with family law work in general is that there is essentially no bar to entry. Anybody with a law degree and a pulse can get a family law practice up and running quickly because there is just an absolute glut of work. What that also means is that 75% plus of the lawyers practicing family law are clueless and awful. Early in my career I certainly was clueless, but at the least I was not awful. Therefore, in a battle between clueless plus awful versus just clueless, clueless usually won. So yeah, I can't recall any specific cases, except to say that fighting over children in court is a terrible thing and basically everyone loses. I regret that entire portion of my career. I wouldn't say I regret this so much as to this day it amazes me. The first year associate I was given a terrible pie case where my client received a flu shot and thereafter felt pain in his shoulder. He went to another doctor who performed an MRI and determined he had a torn rotator cuff, which was undoubtedly not related. My job was to allege the flu shot caused the rotator cuff tear. Our ortho actually correlated the two, which is the more regrettable position, and the case paid out. Being the bottom of the totem pole, I had no choice but to take the case, which was handed down by a partner, but at the same time, just overwhelmingly made me feel like the worst stereotyped attorney and just hated having to walk into court on it and feel my reputation being destroyed. I won a summary judgment motion that my firm filed not expecting to win. We had a decent argument, but odds were way worse than a coin flip and judges don't like granting summary judgment because it's an extreme remedy. Client initially was thrilled. Case is over. We tried to break the news gently. Nope. 3 years later we're back in the same spot we were before we won our motion. The other side appealed it up to the state Supreme Court and won, because the Supreme Court said the trial judge should have denied our motion. So, we are back at square one. North of $100k in legal bills, with no resolution. Maybe it'll settle. Maybe it will go to trial. I'll find out in the next 3-4 months. Eater clarified my parenthetical. Little late to the party, but I've got one I still think about a lot. Worked in criminal defense. Represented a guy in a DUI. He had priors, so another conviction meant time. Lot of license problems. Long story short, he was pulled over by police after they followed him leaving a bar. At trial I elicited admissions from the arresting officer that during the 2.5 miles he followed him for, he did not observe a single moving violation. No speeding, erratic driving, driving over the lines, blowing stop signs, running red lights, didn't even stop suddenly at red lights. Also got the DRE officer to testify that the accused only spoke Spanish and they couldn't get an interpreter officer to the roadside to explain the field sobriety exercises, which the officers documented the accused refused to perform. Jury came back in 15 minutes. Guy was extremely grateful, and his lovely family was very gracious in thanking me and our office. Feel good about the whole thing. Couple months later I'm in county to meet with a client, and I see him in one of the pods. Find out sometime after the trial he violently sexually assaulted his 8-year-old stepdaughter. Think about that one a lot. Edit. The comments have helped. Thanks. I helped a man regain visitation of his child after a year or so in jail. I thought I was a great humanitarian. Oh, the hubris that comes from being a baby attorney. As we were shooting the after court waiting for his ride, he showed me his prison tattoo. Giant letters on his torso that spelled war. White Aryan resistance. I'm a blue-eyed blonde. So I guess he thought I was down with the cause. I went home and threw up. Shadowed on a personal injury case. Their client was drinking in one of our guys' bars and gets wasted. Becomes abusive to staff and then storms out. Falls down the stairs. C6 Asia being complete spinal injury, severe loss of mobility and sensation. His people sue and we force them to accept contributory negligence and personal liability. He gets an okay payout that covers his legal fees and immediate needs and is left disabled. Even if it was seen to be his fault, it was still hard thinking that his life will never be the same just because of one rowdy night. Spinal injury care is massively expensive and the money he received wouldn't be sufficient for his whole life. If you win a case you're not supposed to win under the law, it means that the judge or the other attorney screwed up, and it's difficult to feel bad about that. It also means that the decision likely will be appealed, which makes it hard to get excited about an upset win. Source: am lawyer. Settled a personal injury case for a guy and he was set to get about $5,000. He was in jail. I held the money for a couple months and when he got out he came by to get the money without delay. The next day the cops came around and asked if I knew him. I explained that I did. I was told he died that night of an overdose and the only thing found on him was my card, some drugs he had not yet used, and a needle. I do family law and I represented a father who had lost most of his custody from heroin use and imprisonment as a result. He came to me saying he was clean and doing good and had his life together and it checked out. He had been clean for almost 9 months not counting jail time and seemed sincere in wanting to resume a full relationship with his son. The other side fought viciously to keep him at extremely little custody and supervised at that. But we prevailed and got an order restoring fairly frequent unsupervised partial custody. Not long afterwards, only about 3 months after the case, he was back doing heroin. Sold most of his furniture, and for me the most soul crushing is that he set up a fake GoFundMe stuff for his child's cancer. His child didn't have cancer and has never had cancer, so you know where that money was going. I withdrew my appearance at this point, so I don't know what happened afterwards. But I imagine and hope his custody was taken away. Basically the net result of winning that case was that the poor boy had to witness his father relapse on heroin and was exploited for money. Worst case I ever won. The one I particularly hated happened at my first law job. This woman was a long-term client of my boss. In the past 10 years or so, she has been caught driving under the influence 8 times. Violated home incarceration countless times, been caught with controlled substances a few times, and stabbed 2 people on home incarceration. My boss at the time was a master of getting people off for DUIs, so she had only been convicted of a DUI 3rd and always managed to stay on home incarceration with whatever releases she desired. I always regretted her cases because that woman is truly a danger to the public. She's undoubtedly going to kill someone someday, but I'll be damned if she isn't the luckiest woman alive in getting away with DUIs. I'm a paralegal, not a lawyer. I worked very closely on a case where the client had violently raped their spouse. It was clear from the beginning that the client was mentally unstable and very capable of doing the same type of thing again. We ended up winning because the victim was a young woman. Her demeanor during the trial was atrocious, and the jury was all older men. I represented this construction worker in a divorce. The wife stayed at home with the kids and had no money. Through entire divorce her attorney claimed that my client was hiding money. They had no evidence and the client vehemently denied it. We had a good settlement in the case and I considered it done. When the client came in a few weeks later to pick his file, he thanked me for my work and said, "And she never did find the money I hid." He had a big laugh and walked away. What a D. Not really winning, but I recently had a case settle where my client was so obviously lying it was painful. He was in a fender bender and said he was too disabled to drive or to work at the office as a result, and that his employer fired him after he had been on disability leave for almost a year. A few months after filing, we discovered that he played in a national, amateur, full contact football league and there was footage of him getting tackled, end zone dancing, and tackling during the time he claimed he was too hurt to sit at a desk. Even when I confronted him on it, he claimed he hadn't played while he was injured despite having a stat line and footage of him playing from games dated on days he was supposedly getting physical therapy. We didn't settle for as much as most of my cases, but he still walked away with like $20K. I'm happy to be a plaintiff's attorney for the most part because my clients have typically been wronged, but he was such a bald-faced liar it really pissed me off. Edit. It's worth noting that, embarrassingly, opposing counsel brought it to our attention after they spoke to some of his former co-workers who recalled him bragging about being in the league. Family law custody battle. They are never good and are almost always about money and vengeance. Guy was a convicted felon, so couldn't be in possession of any firearms. He pawned 2 guns that were traced back to him by the pawn shop paperwork. He said they were his and put his thumbprint on the papers. Also had store clerks say he walked in carrying them. His story was that his girlfriend's mom found them after her father died. They were his and wanted to get rid of them. So girlfriend, also convicted felon, asked him to help sell them, which he did. DA office refused to waive the 3-year man prison sentence, so it went to trial. I was the prosecutor when it went and ultimately got a guilty. The guy had to do 3 years day for day. I felt bad because I think his story was true, but he had a conviction for armed robbery and sexual battery from 30 years ago, so that was why the office wouldn't agree to reduce the sentence. Eviction law. Basically every other case. Even the assholes. It's not rewarding to put people out on the curb, ever. My client made a lot of promises to his staff and never had planned to keep them. Was sued. 1. I hated every second of the case. I handle employment cases. We took a disability accommodation case against a regional retail company. To be clear, we were right. Our client was not being given a pretty easy accommodation. Normally, demand letters don't have any real effect. We have stopped sending them to streamline the process and have just started filing with the EOC or the courts directly. That's SOP for us. In this case we followed SOP and filed with the EOC. The company got in touch with us immediately, expressing horror and regret. The whole thing was one poorly trained manager acting out. While that's common, companies usually try to cover for the manager and often make things worse. This one did not. They immediately sent him to be retrained, offered the exact accommodation requested, and paid all lost wages and fees, with some extra for emotional distress. Client happily accepted and went back to work. After seeing the company's great response, I felt bad for taking them to the EOC. Not bad enough to start sending time-wasting demand letters again. But if I ever see them on the other side, I'll make an exception. Edit. I almost wish there was no confidentiality provision in the settlement agreement. Would love to say who this was and tell people that they're a great company. I now prefer shopping with them over their competitors, since I know they're an upstanding group. Every company ducks up sometimes. Not many acknowledge it and try to make it right when they do. I convicted the father of murdering his wife and years later found out he lied when he confessed to cover for his teenage son who actually been the one who killed her. In the meanwhile the son committed suicide. Father was content to serve his time in prison. My mom is a lawyer who worked a case against one of those if you or a loved one were affected by a drug suits. The drug was, in some cases, causing heart issues. Important to note, stress can cause heart issues as well. The suit was filed by a slimy law firm who were telling people that they could win money, even if people were not actually experiencing the side effects. One of these clients had a brain tumor, recently had a nasty divorce, and her son had just died, among all sorts of other terrible luck. Her heart issues did not match the side effects of the drug, and instead looked stress related. So my mom had to cross-examine this woman, asking, could your inoperable brain tumor be causing you stress? Could your divorce from your abusive husband be causing you stress? Could the death of your young son be causing you stress? That woman's case was dismissed, but my mom felt terrible. I have been a licensed attorney for 9 years and I am fortunate to say that I have not had any cases that fit that bill. As others have mentioned, most civil cases settle and most criminal cases get plea bargained. It is subjective in those situations what you call a win or a loss. My first case as a lawyer was a probate case. Husband and wife each had 3 adult children from prior marriages. Husband killed wife and then killed himself. I represented the husband's estate. The kids all hated each other. Wife's kids obviously blamed the husband for killing their mom and the husband's kids blamed the wife for making him crazy enough to kill himself. The husband had multiple properties and was a prominent attorney before the murder-suicide. We had multiple walkthroughs of the property with both sets of kids and lawyers, and needed sheriffs there each time because the kids were threatening to kill each other constantly.